The state attorney general wants to know if big banks here in Minnesota have been foreclosing on homeowners without even looking at their paperwork.
Now the federal government has demanded some banks halt foreclosures altogether. Chris Conti is live tonight with an in-depth look at the issue. Chris.
Rachel, back in September, Brenda Ewing was issued a foreclosure notice. These are the papers that sheriff's deputies left with her 15-year-old son. And since that day, she's been trying everything possible to keep her own home. By now, Brenda Ewing is used to this. Every day, she leaves her home in Northwest Rochester, walks to her Dodge Durango, gets in and makes the short 10-minute drive down Highway 14.
In the house, there's a thing.
Along the way, there's a phone conversation, and country music plays in the background. And by the time she's downtown, radiation treatment for her stage 2 breast cancer is about the only thing on Brenda's mind.
There's a lot of things that go on behind closed doors that people don't see.
But this story isn't just about Brenda's breast cancer.
I really don't. See, and I didn't want to do this.
It's about the fight that was going on long before doctors found a lump back in April.
I came home and saw the papers on the counter. I mean, they didn't have them in an envelope. They just served them flat open.
When sheriff's deputies delivered her foreclosure notice 2 months ago,
I've got documentation.
It was her youngest son that first got the papers.
I cried that night because a 15-year-old shouldn't have to deal with that.
But it's not how the papers were served that disturbed this mother of two. She didn't even know her home was under foreclosure.
Once they served the papers, then they wouldn't take payments from me.
Brenda's is the new face of the foreclosure crisis. A growing number of people who maybe missed one payment, then had their mortgages modified, but the banks have no record of it.
I don't know where they think that people can come up with that money.
A year and a half ago, her mortgage payments were dropped from $1,174 a month to $904 a month. She's been making those payments, but her mortgage company, Citigroup, foreclosed anyways.
If it wasn't for my kids and it being my business, I'd tell them to take it.
And the problem only seems to be getting worse. So far this year, 13,000 Minnesotans have lost their homes because of foreclosures. Compared to the same time last year, that number was around 11,000. But it's not as bad as things were back at the height of the problem in 2008, when 26,000 Minnesotans lost their homes.
It's obviously must be more profitable for them to foreclose than to modify the loan to keep a person in there, and that just decimates our communities.
Congressman Tim Walz's office has personally handled Brenda's case and dozens more like it. He believes irresponsible banks are now to blame for the continuation of the foreclosure crisis.
And unfortunately, the balance of controls tipped so heavily to these big banks, these too big to fail banks, that the consumer was left hanging.
Brenda is now the one left hanging, and it's not the loss of her hair from chemotherapy that keeps this 44-year-old up at night. It's the possibility that she could also lose her home.
And something's got to be done. I don't know what that something is, but something's got to be done.
There is some good news in all of this. Last week, Brenda's loan modification was approved, and just yesterday she found out that her sheriff's sale, scheduled for this Friday, has been canceled. We're live in Northwest Rochester tonight. Chris Conti, KTTC News Center.
Chris, thank you. And tomorrow night at 10, Chris sits down one-on-one with the state attorney general, who is investigating a number of big banks for irresponsible foreclosure practices.
Big banks in hot water for foreclosing on thousands of homeowners without even looking at their paperwork. Tonight, our exclusive one-on-one interview with the state attorney general, who is investigating banks right here in Minnesota. Thanks for joining us tonight. Attorney generals from all across 50 U.S. states are now investigating mortgage lenders like Bank of America and Citigroup.
They're trying to find out if those companies signed hundreds of thousands of foreclosure notices without properly looking at each claim. Chris Conti has been investigating the problem, and he joins us live now with more. Chris.
Rachel, when most people are served foreclosure notices like this one, they assume their bank has taken all the proper steps to do so. But the state attorney general says some of these banks are breaking the law. When Brenda Ewing missed 2 mortgage payments back in 2009, she knew the fight ahead would be tough. But it wasn't until doctors diagnosed her with breast cancer that she'd realized things were about to get even worse.
What am I most thankful for? I guess that I'm alive to fight, you know.
The 44-year-old runs an in-home daycare, but when the economy started going south, she had less kids to take care of. Her income went down, and that's when she called Citigroup to lower her $1,174 monthly mortgage payments.
That's what they said I was past due. And then they added late fees and appraisal fees. And
Brenda eventually managed to lower her payments to $904 a month.
I was making the payments. It's not like I wasn't making the payments. And I guess that's the hardest thing for me to fathom and comprehend.
Remember that. Brenda was making her payments. Imagine her surprise when she was served foreclosure papers in September.
I don't think the left hand talks to the right hand, and nobody knows what's going on.
And you're stuck in the middle.
And I'm stuck in the middle.
For everything Brenda Ewing has been through, there is some hope. The state attorney general is now investigating dozens of big banks across the state for possible irresponsible lending practices when it comes to home foreclosures.
We're just in a real mess of a situation, and a lot of people are getting hurt because of it.
Minnesota Attorney General Lori Swanson is investigating a number of national lenders for irresponsible lending practices. She declined to say if Citigroup is one of them.
A home is most people's major investment. It is their home. It's where they live. There's an emotional attachment to it. And it seems like the lenders are pretty cavalier and callous oftentimes in terms of how they treat the homeowner.
According to Swanson, some banks will approve 10,000 foreclosures in a day, but the affidavits are being signed in bulk and without proper review, meaning people like Brenda are often mistakenly forced out. Do you think a moratorium needs to be put on these foreclosures until the banks can sort this stuff out?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what I would like lenders to do is put a temporary halt on the foreclosures. These big national lenders where we think there are problems, put a temporary halt on them.
Just this afternoon, a top executive from Citi Mortgage testified to Congress, saying, quote, "We have devoted considerable resources to helping our customers. Every delinquent loan is subject to multiple levels of review."
If you're going to take somebody's home, you ought to engage in proper due diligence.
While her state investigation is still ongoing, Swanson says she will hold banks accountable for their actions.
If you're a lender and you're going to foreclose, you really got to go through proper procedures before you can do it.
As for Brenda, she learned just 3 days before her sheriff's sale that things had finally been fixed.
Keep calling them, keep bugging them, and stay on top of it, because nobody's going to advocate for yourself but yourself.
So far, JP Morgan and Bank of America have halted foreclosures until further notice, and experts say they expect the federal government to impose other moratoriums as more investigations are concluded. Live in the studio tonight, Chris Conti, KTTC News Center.